95.9 Academy FM.
The sound of Folkestone.
The Folkestone Airshow 2013 was cancelled on Friday, with organisers citing a lack of funding as the reason they had to call it off at short notice. Many local people have been disappointed by the announcement and want to know not only why it was cancelled, but why the decision happened so late. In this issue of Academy Reports, we speak to the major players in the Airshow's organisation and find out about the background behind the Airshow and the reasons why it's been cancelled. To start with, we found out how the 2013 Airshow was managed. Despite many local people assuming it was the council's responsibility, the event was actually overseen by Folkestone Town Centre Management. Academy FM's station manager Dave Sharp spoke to the Airshow's organiser and project manager Yvonne Holder about the town centre's role.
Folkestone Town Centre Management Limited organised Folkestone Airshow. I was the project manager. We had a full project structure. Folkestone Town Centre Management Limited board sat at the top. John Barber, as Folkestone Town Centre Manager, was the project executive. Myself as the project manager. And underneath there was other people and looking after different parts of the organisation, from fundraising, from volunteers, from local visitor economy, people from local businesses and residents.
Was it the same as last year?
No, it wasn't. Last year's the Jubilee Air Show was organised by Folkestone Town Centre Management Limited with the help of Events and Heritage Events.
So these are two basic kind of professional, if you like, events companies that were hired in to do it?
Yes, they were.
OK, let's move on to the actual nuts and bolts of why the air show was cancelled. It was something to do with the Safety Advisory Group. What do they do, and how did they come to the decision that meant that you had to cancel the air show?
Safety Advisory Group is made up of key partners and under the direction of Shetway District Council. Their role is to scrutinise any major event that goes on within the district to ensure public safety.
To find out more about the role of the Safety Advisory Group and its involvement in the Airshow, Dave Sharp spoke to their chairman, Jeremy Chambers, who works for Shetway District Council.
The Safety Advisory Group for Shetway is a collection of partner agencies, and that includes Kent Police, Kent Fire and Rescue, the National Health Service, the Highways Agency, the County Council and Shetway District Council. And those agencies come together to give advice to event organisers.
Is it right to say that a lot of resources from Shetway District Council then actually went into the airshow, despite the fact that you weren't organising it?
Yes, it is fair to say that. I mean, I think it was probably worth saying at this point how disappointed all the partner agencies are that the event is not going ahead. There's been a huge amount of work done, even more work done by Yvonne Holder, whose efforts have been superb in trying to do all the things she needs to do to make the event happen.
Lead me up to what was happening prior to the decision being made about the airshow being cancelled.
Well, I think it's probably worth clarifying that the decision of the Safety Advisory Group was not a decision to cancel the airshow.
Right.
The Safety Advisory Group was asked for a view on whether the event was safe as at the date it met. The Safety Advisory Group and the partner agencies could not confirm in their view that the event was safe.
For them to be able to assess the full risk, they need to know exactly what's going to be happening.
So basically, you couldn't tell them exactly how many aircraft would be in the airshow, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We had our RAF allocation, so we already knew that we were having the Red Arrows, the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight and the other aircraft. But that only actually would have lasted between an hour and 15 and an hour and 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. What we were hoping for was to contract additional flying displays, which would then extend the length of time of the event.
One of the huge challenges for Yvonne, given the financial restraints she was operating under, it was very difficult for her to confirm the flight programme. Now, the flight programme itself dictates the scale of the event. So we could have had a situation where the event was 1 hour 15 minutes, or the event was 5 hours. And obviously that would have a significant impact on the resources in terms of marshalling, emergency service provision, everything you can think of that goes behind an event. In order for the event to go ahead, an application would need to be made to the Civil Aviation Authority for the necessary permissions for the event to happen. In order to do that, the flight director needed to have the full details of the flight programme. It was simply a matter of insufficient information. And I have a lot of sympathy with the event organiser because it was a very difficult thing for her to try and achieve.
So the Safety Advisory Group could not sign off the air show because the organisers could not confirm which aircraft would be flying or the length of the display. This was due to difficulties raising the money they needed to book the aircraft in advance. Dave Sharp asked Yvonne Holder about the air show's finances.
So in terms of the aircraft flying, this presumably costs you money. Did the RAF aircraft, like the Red Arrows and so on, do you have to pay like tens of thousands of pounds for them to come and do an air show?
Yes, you do have to pay. The thing about the RAF allocation, you don't have to pay until after the event.
OK.
So with regards to civil flying displays, because we were so short in time, we would have actually had to have paid for majority of the money up front.
And you didn't have that money in the bank?
We weren't able to take the risk. If you think a lot of the income that was going to be generated would have been generated on the day. So we were talking about income through from car parks, sale of merchandise. A lot of that money would have been realised on the day.
Last year there was quite a successful air show. Why didn't Folkestone Town Centre management keep money in the bank from last year to avoid these problems this year?
Last year's air show was not a financial success and there was no money left over. In fact, the opposite. There was a deficit for last year. So there was no money to start the budget for this year.
I spoke to Town Centre manager John Barber and asked him how it was possible that 2012 Jubilee Air Show ended up losing money.
The only reason we were able to go ahead with that was that we managed to find somebody who would underwrite the whole project. It was done very quickly in haste because we were dealing with the Jubilee event and we were suddenly told we could have the Red Arrows. So we thought, ooh, and once you get the Red Arrows, you've got half an air show, haven't you? So we moved forward very rapidly and got a lot of support for that. And it went very well too.
Now, this year has been cancelled because of funding. What was the situation last year?
Well, as I say, last year we had an underwriter, so we knew that we had a certain amount of money that we could spend, because a lot of money is spent before the air show. You can't rely. We didn't make much money on the day, so there was nothing left over for future years.
Despite the 2012 airshow losing money, it was considered locally a success by the general public and businesses alike. Because of the positive feeling toward the airshow last year, organisers believe it would be possible to create another, bigger, better event this year.
At that time, everybody was still basking in having 60,000 visitors attend Folkestone Airshow on the 2nd of June. So the response from local businesses was quite overwhelming, as in the fact of promise. They wanted opportunities to trade, they wanted opportunities to sponsor, they wanted opportunities to advertise and support Folkestone Airshow.
You hoped that support from local business would translate into money?
Yes.
Did it?
In a nutshell, no, it didn't. We had a buy local ethos around Folkestone Airshow. We have, where possible, tried to make sure that every pennies that we spend are spent on our local businesses. My printing is done in Folkestone, my design is done in Folkestone. When it comes to terms of trade, for whatever reason, and I think the majority of it is going to be for financial reasons, our local traders were unable to take up the opportunities for our trading space. So it did have to go outside of our district. I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but did you approach all local traders, I don't know, people who own local burger vans, local restaurateurs or so on, to deal with catering and so on? Are you confident that you got the message across well enough that local people and their businesses could be involved? Well, I do hope so. I mean, obviously, I'm going to come under scrutiny and criticism through the Kent Channel Chamber of Commerce, through the Folkestone Independent Traders Association, through the Hotels and Catering Association, through membership organisations that businesses become members of, and also through actually walking around the town and asking businesses to take part and to attend our launch. So I am aware that we haven't probably reached everybody, but we've done as best as we can. Now, in terms of a mechanism for businesses to be involved and support the airshow and, well, give you money, did you have some sort of friends organisation, supporting organisation in place that people could join? The Friends of Folkestone Airshow was to be for a VIP experience, but actually, when it was launched, it was hoped that people would become a friend of Folkestone Airshow to financially support it, and in return, on the day they would get a complimentary drink on arrival and those types of things.
So how many people did you actually have sign up on a kind of business level to the Friends, roughly?
None.
Absolutely zero?
Absolutely zero.
Despite their income from fundraising being lower than expected, the organisers were, in reality, fairly close to their target.
How much would it have cost to put on the air show, and how much had you actually raised up till Wednesday of last week?
It was coming out around about £150,000. Had we had £30,000, with the money that we already had in the bank account, would have meant that the risk was an acceptable risk to take. Unfortunately, I've had several emails saying £30,000, is that all we're talking about? £30,000 is a lot of money if you don't have it.
Couldn't this funding crisis have been seen earlier, though, because it was cancelled at about a month to go?
We were talking to a potential sponsor. The conversations with that potential sponsor just came in a little bit too late.
Jeremy Chambers from the Shepway Advisory Group.
There just wasn't the time. And to perhaps put it into perspective, the way we normally timetable significant events such as the Air Show and such as the War and Peace Revival Show is we like to have a full set of event management plans and supporting documentation 3 months prior to the date of the event. It's slipped and slipped and slipped through no lack of effort from the event organiser, to the point that the event organiser recognised they weren't going to do what they needed to do and made the decision themselves to cancel the event.
And when did Folkestone Town Centre management realise there was a funding situation?
The project management team and town centre management have been looking at it ever since January. The money that was coming in seemed to indicate that we would get the sufficient support for it to go ahead. Unfortunately, the Buy Locally programme that we worked on, and the hope that we would be able to get quite a lot from local businesses and the general public, they've all been generous, but not generous enough. If I could put it a different way, all the other projects that we organise, we have a plan. It's going to cost $15,000. We look for the funding and we get $8,000. We can cut it down and still have a very good show. With the air show, it's impossible to do that because the cost of all the main infrastructure bits before the event to make it safe and secure and can go ahead are huge when you're planning for 100,000 people. You can't reduce that down. So we had to have some money up front.
John Barber. One of the highlights of the 2012 Jubilee Air Show was the Red Arrows and other RAF aircraft. Considering the team couldn't raise the money in advance for a full-length display including civilian planes, why not just focus on the RAF?
Well, that was an option, and that's what we were going to do until the potential sponsor came to light.
So you couldn't even run that shorter?
No, we could have done. We could have run an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half, flying display. But in being unfair to the traders that were coming, on the expectation of 100,000 people attending,
right,
they didn't pay for the trade stand for an hour and 15 minute, an hour and a half trade-in.
Do you think in retrospect that you should have initially planned for a smaller air show?
Hindsight's a wonderful tool. And, if we all had the vision of hindsight or a crystal ball, then none of us would try anything.
Now, in situations like this, a lot of people like to point the finger of blame, sometimes unfairly. This is your chance to set the record straight on who did what and how much was asked of you. Were you essentially organising the whole thing here?
I was the only full-time person working on the air show. Our project management team is made up of other people, and all of whom have got full-time jobs.
And who's paying you to do this? Is it Folkestone Town Centre Management?
Paying?
Yeah.
No, I have not been paid for this event.
Have you done all this as a volunteer?
Yes. I'm not saying that I wasn't going to be paid. Had the money materialised on the day, then yes, I would have. I would have had money. But I agreed. Well, actually, it was my suggestion that I would not submit any invoices to Folkestone Town Centre Management unless we had the money to pay for it. I mean, I've lived Folkestone Airshow along with a lot of other people for the last 11 months. So yes, basically, I have done this as a volunteer.
Jeremy Chambers is positive about how Yvonne managed the project, but questions the overall resources made available.
Without the significant upfront funding that's required for an event of this scale, it was very difficult for Folkestone Town Centre management to assume the financial risk of the event proceeding. I think we have to acknowledge the hard work Yvonne's done.
For an event of this size, would you normally be dealing with a larger team of people who could maybe come up with all the plans and I suppose the funding as well by the required time?
Yes, you would. Yes. You would expect to see a larger team, and that team would have people with professional expertise of the elements of the event they're responsible for.
I asked John Barber about how the workload was managed. Do you think it was right that one person had that amount of work?
On something like this, it's a democratic dictatorship works quite well. If I look at Shepway District Council, when they used to do it, we tried to have a look. They had one person who was in overall charge and control of the air show, but she had the backing of a huge amount of staff. The backing here that Yvonne could get is small. We're a small team, but we all did the very best we could, and we hope we gave her the support that she needed. Whether we're the right people to do it is perhaps a question that will need to be asked, because it is a massive, massive project.
As well as John Barber raising the question of whether the town centre management were best equipped to manage the air show, Yvonne Holder also admitted to Dave Sharp that mistakes were made.
Do you think that the town centre management, and I suppose yourself as well, were being overly ambitious here, bearing in mind that money was lost last year?
Yes, I think you could say that we were overly ambitious. I think the benefit to Folkestone far outweighs, the amount of work or the ambitious ideas of myself or even Folkestone Town Centre Management Limited. If I was to sit here and do nothing, or if anybody else was to sit there and do nothing and not try anything, then nothing would actually happen.
We have so far heard on this Academy reports that Shepway District Council were not managing the 2013 air show. What they did do, however, was contribute a lot of time to help the organisers make it work. The truth is, it was cancelled because the funding did not come in on time for the organisers to put on the air show they had sold to local businesses and the public. When they realised, it was too late for them to scale the plans down. Questions need to be asked if Folkestone continue to have an air show. Who should manage it? How often should it happen? And how large the team should be? If all this is worked out, can Folkestone host an air show next year?
We've got a fantastic venue. If I can get the finances sorted, then yes, I do think that Folkestone can host an air show.
But surely after the failure of this year, you are going to get some people not wanting to support you because they see it as a risk because 2013 didn't happen. Is this the time now to go and speak to the council who previously ran the very successful Shepway Air Show and see if you can work in conjunction with them, especially regards to their fundraising experience?
I mean, that's obviously an area that I need to look at.
John Barber also agrees on the need for them to consider a fundraiser.
I think it's certainly something we'll be looking at. We created the Folkestone Festivals Committee, for example, and we've been going for 2 years now. And the idea at some stage is that maybe we could work towards the Canterbury model of having the Canterbury Festival with a fully paid staff and team. The whole aim that we've had is to make every time you come to Folkestone, there's always something going on. So one of them not succeeding is not a nice position, but there are still lots of other things going on. And whether you talk about the Multicultural Festival or the Mermaid or the Fish Fest, some of them are new, some of them are interesting, the proms. At the end of the day, this is the sole reason for having any of the events, including Air Show, is to increase footfall in this town.